and yeah, chip in whenever you want. So here we are. We got our sternum and our mandible. We got our clavicle here. We got our scapula at the back and our humerus on the clavicle. And this on the clavicle, we've got our acromial side, which is this lateral side, and then our sternal side. You can tell by the smaller curve here, the concave curve, sorry, and then this side is the convex. And it's a lot sharper bend here, so that's how you can tell. It's the acromial side. It's also got the conoid tubercle here, which is where the conoid ligament attaches, which I'll show you later. And next to it here is the trapezoid line, which is where the trapezoid ligament attaches, which are that with your conoid ligament make up your corticoclavicular ligaments, which we'll see later. Your subclavial groove here, where your subclavius muscle attaches, and then this kind of roughening here is where your costoclavicular ligament attaches, which we'll see later as well. Cool. Then we go to our scapula. Scapula, we've got our spinous scapula here, our acromion at the top. We've got our medial border, our lateral border, our superior border up here. We've got our coracoid process here, where your short head of bicep attaches and your pectoralis minor attaches. And then we've got our supraglenoid tubercle in here, and we've got our infraglenoid tubercle here. Supraglenoid tubercle is where the long head of biceps originates from, and the infraglenoid tubercle is where the long head of the triceps originate from. We've got our supraspinous fossa, where your spinatus sits, and we've got our infraspinous fossa, where our infraspinatus sits. And then on the anterior side, we've got our subscapular groove, or subscapular fossa, excuse me, where our subscap sits, and then on that medial border is where the serratus anterior muscle originates from as well. Moving on to the humerus, we've got our lesser tubercle, where the subscapularis attaches to, and then we've got our greater tubercle, where our spinatus, infraspinatus, and our supraspinatus attach to, as well as the teres minor. So those are the rotator cuffs. Remember, the greater tubercle is responsible for all the lateral rotation. So your supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and your teres minor all laterally rotate the humerus, whereas the subscapularis internally rotates the humerus. Here we've got our bicipital groove. This is where your long head of biceps runs through, which we'll see later. And then you've got your intratrabecular sulcus, got your lateral lip, which is where your pectoralis major attaches, your floor of the intratrabecular sulcus, where your latissimus dorsi attaches, and your medial lip, which is where your teres major attaches. And if you remember, it's the lady between two majors. So you've got your latissimus dorsi, and then your two major muscles, your pectoralis and your teres. Down here, you've got your deltoid tuberosity, where your deltoid muscle attaches. And then at the back here, you've got your radial groove, where your radial nerve sits and is the division between the medial and the lateral head of the tricep. So you've got your lateral head attaches superior to this radial groove, and then your medial head attaches inferior to this radial groove, which we'll see later. As I come down to the distal humerus, we've got all our fossas. We've got our radial fossa, where the radial head falls into when we flex our elbow, and we've got our coronoid fossa, where our coronoid tubercle of the ulna, this bit here, our coronoid process, of the ulna, which is here, goes up and falls into that when we flex our elbow. We've got our medial epicondyle, our lateral epicondyle, and with those, there's the supracondylar ridge, so your lateral and medial supracondylar ridge. And then we've got our capitate, which is this half of the condyle, and then we've got our trochanter, which is this half of the condyle. If we go to the back, we've got our olecranon falling in the olecranon fossa, We've got our supinator crest, which is this divot here. That's where the supinator muscle originates from. We've got our radial tuberosity, where your biceps attached to, and we've got our ulnar tuberosity, which is where the brachialis muscle attaches to. And then between that will be the interosseous membrane. You've got your oblique line, which just runs inferior to the radial tuberosity. And I think that's all those main ones there. Coming down here, you've got your styloid process of the ulna, which is this kind of tuberance here. You've got your distal end of the radius, backside. Ooh. Here you've got your dorsal tuberosity. And if you remember, this is where your abductors and your extensors come from for the thumb. So you got your abductor pollicis, which comes down and attaches. Oh my God. Comes down and attaches here. And then this dorsal tuberosity divides the extensor pollicis, longus and brevis. So the longest runs medially, whereas the brevis runs laterally. And if you flex your thumb, that, and you get that anatomical snuff box, you can see the longus and the brevis. That brevis is more medial, and that longus is more lateral. Oh, sorry, longus is more medial, sorry, and the brevis is more lateral. Make sense? Cool. Yeah, if you need me to repeat anything, let me know. And then we go into the bones of the hand. If you remember the saying that goes with this, it's some lovers try positions that they can't handle. So you got your scaphoid, you got your lunate, got your triquetrum back here, and your pisiform, which sits on top of the triquetrum. Then you come back to the lateral side, and you've got your trapezium, your trapezoid, your hamate, and your capitate, sorry. Oh no, sorry, capitate is the middle one, hamate is the outer one. And then those articulate with the metacarpals. And then with the metacarpals, you've just got your distal and your proximal and distal. And then with the longer ones, you've got your proximal, middle, and distal. And yeah, I actually just came back from the physio and I fucked up my my thumb joint here, my thumb metacarpal joint. I also fractured my middle finger's metacarpophalangeal joint as well. So my right hand's kind of out of commission.
How'd you do that?
Both were playing rugby. I jarred my thumb like 5 times throughout the season, and now it's kind of like off axis a bit. And then I got stomped on in another rugby game, and that's what fractured my hand.
Ouch.
That's not good.
Wow. Pretty fucked, but whatever. Cool. So we'll go over the ligaments before we do muscles, just as a refresher. Did that jazz with everyone? Did everyone kind of remember all that?
It's coming back.
I don't think it matters so much about the like the like attachment points and stuff. I think if we just take away like the general kind of organization and understanding of how it's supposed to look, I think that'll be enough.
Yeah, I think it's more of a refresher now. Just get all the information back here.
So you got your synovial joint. So this is your synovial capsule. These are your glenohumeral ligaments. So you got your superior, your middle, and your inferior glenohumeral ligament. This is your AC joints. This is where your coracoclavicular ligament will come from. This is your coraco, because it comes from the coracoid process. Humeral, so coracohumeral ligament. And then this ligament here coming across this bicipital groove is your transverse ligament. And then this is like the sheath for the biceps tendon that comes through. Here is your coracoacromial ligament. Yeah, not much to say about that one. And then here you can see your coracoclavicular ligaments. And then this is the trapezius, which comes from that trapezoid line. and inserts into the coracoid process. And then this is your conoid ligament here, which comes from the coracoid to the conoid ligament. And then you've got your anterior and your posterior sternoclavicular ligaments. Just there. And then one layer more, we've got our, and then this was the costoclavicular ligament. And it's kind of off-putting, but they, for some reason, animate the heart in this anatomical figure, and it's gross. I don't know why they made it so like wet and shiny. And then, yeah, you just got your costal ligaments running along here. Coming down to the elbow, you've got your annular ligament, ligament that kind of seats this radius, the head of the radius to the ulna, just wraps around the back. And then you've got your, in here, whoa, you've got your radial collateral ligament. I believe it's this one. Yep, radial collateral. So that just keeps the radius attached to the humerus. And then you've got your ulnar collateral ligament back here. Oh, it's frozen. It's on. Yeah, ulnar collateral ligament. And then the rest of it's, I think, just kind of a sheath. Yeah, fibrous layer of the capsule. Interosseous membrane connects the radius and the ulna. And then you've got your flexor retinaculum down here, which begins the carpal tunnel. And then you just got your palmaris longus aponeurosis, palmar aponeurosis here. But we can go through the ligaments of the hand after we go through the muscles. It'll make it a bit easier to remember. Cool. All right. So starting off, we got our deltoids, shoulder muscle. They come from the clavicle, the scapula, and the spinal scapula, and the acromion and the spinal scapula. There's three orientations of muscles. You've got your anterior, your lateral, and your posterior fibers, and they insert into the deltoid tuberosity. And this is responsible, or this is the reason why they can flex, extend, abduct, rotate laterally and medially. And it's innervated by the axillary nerve. Next, the traps, or the trapezoids. They come from the spinous processes of like C6 or C2 down to T12 or something. And they insert into the scapula, clavicle, and the acromion. And they too have ascending fibers here. They got lateral fibers or horizontal fibers up here, sorry, transverse fibers, and then they got descending up here. And that's why they're responsible for elevating and depressing, as well as retracting the scapula. And they're innervated by the accessory nerve. One layer deep, we've got our rhomboids and our levator scapula. You get your levator scapula here coming from C2 to C5, and that inserts into the superior angle of the scapula, and it's responsible for elevating the scapula. Your rhomboid minor is here, comes from C7 to T1 and inserts into the middle part of the medial border of the scapula. And then you got your rhomboid major, which comes from T2 to T5, and that attaches to that inferior medial border of the scapula. And they're all innervated by the dorsal scapular nerve and are responsible for elevation of the scapula, as well as some rotation and retraction. Next, you got your latissimus dorsi, comes from like T5 all the way down to the ilium, and connects to the tensor fascia lata, which divides the external and the internal muscles of the back. It comes around and attaches to that floor of the intratrabecular sulcus, later between two majors, and that's innervated by the thoracodorsal nerve, and is responsible for extension of the arm as well as some rotation as well. Then in here, you've got your rotator cuffs. So you've got your supraspinatus, inserting into that superior facet of the greater tubercle. Got your infraspinatus, which inserts into that middle facet of the greater tubercle. And then you've got your teres minor, which comes from that lateral border of the scapula and inserts into the inferior facet of the greater tubercle. And they're all responsible for lateral rotation. And then you've got your teres major here, which comes from just below the teres minor and inserts into that medial lip of the intratrabecular sulcus. These, give a better picture of it. Yep. So you got your latissimus dorsi here, attaching to that floor. Then you've got your teres major here, teres minor, sorry, just here, attaching to that medial lip of the intratrabecular sulcus. The supraspinatus and the infraspinatus are innervated by the supraspinatus nerve, or suprascapular nerve, sorry. And then your teres minor is innervated by the axillary nerve, which is the same as the deltoid. And then your teres major is innervated by the inferior subscapular nerve. I'm not sure how well we need to know the innervations of this, but we'll just go through it anyway. Then we come to the front, whatever this is. We've got our subclavius muscle here, comes down, inserts into the first rib, and that's just for stability. It pretty much just locks this clavicle in place. Then we've got our back. Pectoralis major comes from the clavicle, the sternum, and then some of the abdominal fascia down here, and inserts into that lateral lip of the intratrabecular sulcus. And that's innervated by the pectoralis nerve, the medial and lateral pectoralis nerve, and is responsible for flexion as well as abduction of the arm. Of the shoulder joint, I should say. Then you've got your pectoralis minor, which comes from the ribs 2 to 5 and inserts into that coracoid process. And this helps with breathing, whatever they called it. It's an accessory muscle for breathing if you fully inspire or expire. And it's innervated by the medial pectoral nerve, medial because it originates from this medial side of the thoracic cage, rather than where it inserts into the coracoid process. And then behind it is the serratus anterior, which are these muscles. Remember, these wrap around the back and attach to the medial border of the scapula. Just in here. Yep, that's where it attaches, on that anterior side of the medial border of the scapula. And it's responsible for protraction of the scapula. So if you think of like kangaroos staunching, flexing their shoulders forward, that's what the serratus anteriors are for. 10 minutes left. Oh, we can just restart this. It's innervated by the long thoracic nerve. And then you got your subscapularis here, comes from the subscapular fossa, inserts into this lesser tubercle, hence why it's responsible for lateral rotation, medial rotation, and it is innervated by the subscapular nerve. That's it for the upper arm. Next, we can go on to the proper arm.
I was going to say, we can do discord because there's no limits on Discord, but if that's a problem, I mean, you can always restart this, but yeah.
Oh yeah, true. I don't know if everyone's got Discord or not.
I have unlimited if you want to use Zoom again.
Oh yeah, that could work.
Oh, yeah, I can work.
Cool. Let's just get this running, and then when it conks out, we can swap it over. Awesome. If we get rid of these. So now onto the anterior compartment of the arm. Everything in this compartment is innervated by the musculocutaneous nerve. Starting off, we've got our biceps brachii. We've got the short head coming from the coracoid process, the long head coming from the supraglenoid tubercle, running down through that biceptal groove, inserting down into that radial tuberosity. And it's responsible for flexion of the elbow as well as the shoulder, because it crosses both, whatever they call it, a bicompartmental muscle, or whatever they called it. Then we've got our coracobrachialis. This comes from the coracoid process and attaches to that medial side of the humerus. And it's responsible for flexion of the glenohumeral joint, shoulder. It is also innervated by the musculocutaneous nerve. And then we got our brachialis here, which comes from that anterior surface of the radius, of the humerus, sorry, and that inserts into the ulnar tuberosity. And all those are responsible for flexion. And then we've got our triceps brachii. The long head comes from that infraglenoid tubercle up at the scapula. Yep. And this inserts into the head of the olecranon. And then you've got your medial and lateral head. It's kind of awkward to see. See the medial head there. This is the lateral head, and it's divided by that radial groove. So the lateral head attaches superior to it, and the medial head attaches inferior to it. And yep, responsible for extension of the arm and the elbow, and only the triceps, the long head of the triceps, is responsible for extension of the shoulder. Otherwise, it's just the latissimus dorsi that helps out. And then lastly, you got your anconeus, which is this tiny muscle here. And that comes from the posterior surface of the lateral epicondyle and attaches to the olecranon, and also helps with extension of the elbow. And all that is innervated by the radial nerve.